Welcome to Black and Slain Stories, the channel where we bring you powerful, thought-provoking narratives that explore the struggles, resilience, and ultimate triumphs of Black lives. If you're new here, make sure to hit that like button, comment below, and subscribe to become part of our growing community. We'd love to hear from you. Comment and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to tap that notification bell so you never miss an unforgettable story. Today's tale will shake you to your core. It's a story of injustice, deep-rooted racism, and the triumph of a mother's love and resilience. Stay with us as we reveal a fight for dignity and justice that unfolded at 30,000 feet in the sky. The sun had barely begun to rise as the Blackwell family prepared for their first flight together. Lisa Blackwell, a single mother of three, had been saving for this moment for months, a treat for herself and her triplets, Aaron, Alex, and Austin. Today wasn't just any ordinary trip. This was a milestone, a celebration, a moment to leave behind a weight of daily life and immerse themselves in something extraordinary. The airport buzzed with activity. The sound of rolling suitcases, the chime of intercoms announcing flights, the hustle of travelers rushing from one gate to the next. Lisa stood in line at the check-in counter, her hands gripping tightly to the boarding passes. She glanced back at her children, who were already causing a ruckus as usual. Aaron, the oldest at 17, was tall and lean, a natural leader with a quick wit. He bounced from foot to foot, scanning the airport with wide, excited eyes. Alex, 16, was more reserved, his head always in a book or daydreaming about the future. Austin, the youngest at 15, was the smallest but had the biggest heart, always eager to protect his siblings and make everyone laugh. Lisa smiled as she watched them interact, their laughter filling the space around them. It had been a tough few years, juggling work, school, and life's endless challenges. But today, in this moment, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. Lisa, softly to herself, "This is for them. We're going to make memories. Today's the day we get to fly." The moment felt fragile, as if she could reach out and grab hold of this fleeting joy, keep it safe in her hands forever. The first glimpse of the flight crew. As Lisa and her children made their way toward the gate, the plane's boarding process had begun. They passed by uniformed flight attendants, bustling with efficiency, their faces a mix of warm smiles and corporate detachment. One flight attendant, Kathy, caught Lisa's eye as she made her way down the aisle to greet another group of passengers. Kathy was older, perhaps in her 30s, with sharp features and an aloof air about her. Lisa didn't think much of it at first. Flight attendants were often busy, and their smiles didn't always match their eyes. But something about Kathy's glance seemed a little too calculating, a little too judgmental. As the family settled into their seats, Lisa felt the tension in the air. Row 14 wasn't the best seat on the plane, but it wasn't the worst either. It was a decent spot right by the aisle. Austin immediately kicked back, pushing his seat back as far as it could go. Alex pulled out his book, lost in his world of fantasy. Aaron, as usual, was the one keeping the peace, trying to keep everyone in check. Kathy moved down the aisle, offering drinks to the passengers around them. But as she passed by, she hesitated for just a second too long. Her eyes flicked over the family. A brief, almost imperceptible moment that left Lisa with a strange, uncomfortable feeling. Lisa, to herself, why did she stop looking at us? But the feeling passed quickly. She shook it off and tried to focus on the flight. It was their first time flying together. This was supposed to be a happy, stress-free day. The first signs of unease. As the plane took off, the sky brightening in front of them, Lisa felt herself relax. It was just a flight. They would get to their destination in no time, and everything would be fine. But as the flight attendants continued their rounds, Lisa noticed Kathy's gaze drifting toward their row again. It was subtle, but Lisa wasn't imagining it. Every time Kathy passed by, she lingered a little too long. Her gaze seemed to linger on their bags, her eyes darting from one child to the next. Aaron whispering, "Mom, why does she keep looking at us?" Lisa glanced up, her gaze meeting Kathy's. For a split second, Kathy's eyes widened as if caught off guard. But then, just as quickly, Kathy looked away, resuming her task. Lisa's heart began to race. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She leaned in, speaking softly to her children. Lisa, quietly. Just keep calm, okay? Don't worry about her. We're just here to enjoy the flight. But deep down, Lisa's instincts told her that something was off. She didn't want to believe it, but the feeling was growing stronger by the second. Was Kathy just doing her job, or was something else going on? The first hint of discrimination. An hour into the flight, things started to take a turn. Kathy, now finishing her rounds, approached the family again. This time, she wasn't offering drinks. Instead, she stopped in front of Lisa's row and looked them over in silence, her gaze lingering on their bags. Kathy, flatly, is there a reason your bags are so full? You're not carrying anything suspicious, are you? Lisa's heart dropped. Lisa, taken aback. Excuse me? Kathy, coldly. Just wondering. Some passengers tend to hide things in their bags. It's part of our protocol to check for that. Lisa's mind raced. The entire cabin had fallen silent, and now she realized every eye was on her family. The other passengers had stopped chatting, their eyes darting from Kathy to Lisa, then back again. Aaron, defensive. We didn't steal anything. We've been shopping like everyone else. Kathy, sharply. I'm not accusing you of stealing, but we can't have any issues on this flight. I'm just doing my job. Lisa could feel the sweat forming on her palms. She tried to keep her voice steady, but there was a lump in her throat. She couldn't believe what was happening. Her children were just sitting there, confused and frightened. Lisa, voice trembling. We haven't done anything wrong. Why are you accusing us? You have no right to treat us this way. The tension in the cabin was palpable. The other passengers were starting to whisper among themselves. The plane felt smaller, and for a moment, Lisa could hardly breathe. She tried to stay calm for her children, but her mind was racing. This was happening. This was real, and it was happening to them. Escalation of the situation. Kathy ignored Lisa's protest, raising her voice slightly as she turned to a flight attendant nearby. Kathy, loudly. We need to call security. These two have been acting suspiciously, and I think we have a problem. Laura, quietly, pulling Kathy aside. Kathy, we can't just accuse them without proof. We need to be careful here. Kathy, irritated. I don't have time for this. I'm following protocol. Lisa's voice cracked as she spoke. Lisa, firmly. This is racial profiling. You can't treat us like this. You have no proof, no reason to accuse us. Security guard, arriving at their row. What seems to be the issue here? Kathy quickly pointed at Lisa and her children. Kathy, accusing. These two have been acting suspicious. I saw them hide something in their bags. The security guard looked between Kathy and Lisa, unsure of what to do. He glanced at the other passengers, some of whom were already filming the incident on their phones. Tasha, holding her phone up, recording. This is racial profiling. You need to stop treating us this way. Security guard, hesitating. Well, we do have to follow protocol. Please remain calm, and we'll check your bags. Derek, Lisa's 18-year-old cousin, stood up and stepped forward. Derek, frustrated. No, you don't have the right to do this. We didn't steal anything. Kathy, shouting. Get security here right now. The viral moment. Lisa pulled her phone out and began recording. The situation had already spiraled out of control. She knew this was her moment to fight back, to make sure the truth was heard. Lisa, to the camera. I'm recording this. This is what racial profiling looks like. This is how black people get treated every single day. The phone light was on. The camera was rolling. And the video would soon become a symbol, not just for her family, but for everyone who had ever been discriminated against. The plane's engines hummed steadily, but to Lisa Blackwell, it felt as if the world around her was spiraling into chaos. Her hands clenched around her seatbelt, and her heartbeat echoed in her ears. What started as a joyful experience, her first flight with her children, had morphed into something far more sinister. Her children were quiet now, wide-eyed, unsure what was happening. Aaron, Alex, and Austin had never experienced something like this before. They had flown to celebrate, to bond, to explore. But now, They were being treated like criminals on an airplane for no reason other than the color of their skin. Lisa, softly, as she looks around the cabin. Stay calm, kids. It's going to be all right. The words felt hollow as she said them. In her heart, Lisa wasn't so sure. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was racial profiling. A moment where her family was being judged not by their actions, but by their appearance. Kathy's cold gaze. Kathy, the flight attendant, stood by the galley, watching the family from across the aisle. Her eyes were narrowed slightly, lips pressed into a thin line. It was as though she was waiting for something. What exactly? Another chance to accuse them? Another moment to assert her control? Lisa couldn't say for sure, but she knew one thing. Kathy wasn't about to back down. The family's awkward silence was interrupted by the soft chime of the intercom as the captain's voice came through. "Captain," over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently at cruising altitude. We ask that you remain seated and keep your seatbelt fastened. The crew will begin beverage service shortly." There was nothing particularly strange about the announcement, but as the intercom clicked off, Lisa could feel the weight of the words. "We are currently at cruising altitude." Her children's safety felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. But it wasn't just the altitude she was concerned about. It was the people on this plane and the way they saw her family. As Kathy moved past Lisa's row again, she didn't stop to offer drinks. She merely glanced at the family, a cold look that felt like it pierced straight through Lisa. Kathy didn't even acknowledge them with a smile, just a curt nod as she passed, her eyes lingering longer on them than anyone else. Lisa, to herself quietly, "She's looking at us like we're guilty." Her instinct was right. Kathy's gaze wasn't just an accident. It was deliberate. Every step Kathy took seemed to echo through the cabin, causing a ripple of discomfort in Lisa's chest. She could feel the invisible line that had been drawn, the divide between her family and everyone else. But the subtle tensions didn't end with Kathy. The other passengers, too, began to react. First, it was just a glance, a brief, lingering look. Then it was a whisper, soft enough to escape attention, but loud enough for Lisa to hear. She couldn't make out the exact words, but the tone was unmistakable. Suspicion, discomfort, fear. Passenger 1, whispering to their seatmate, "Do you think they're really here for a flight? Or, Passenger 2, hushed, "I don't know. Maybe it's a setup. They're just sitting there." So still. Those words, though quiet, were like a punch in the gut to Lisa. They were just there to travel, to live their lives. But to these strangers, her children were already suspects. Suspicious because of what? Because they were black? The thought made her stomach churn. She had dealt with subtle racism before, but this felt different. This was blatant. This was open. This was happening in front of her, on a plane, surrounded by people who didn't even realize how deeply their perceptions had been shaped. Lisa, whispering to herself, "I won't let this stand. I won't let my kids feel less than." Kathy returned, this time with a drink cart, and began to serve the other passengers. When she reached row 14, Lisa braced herself. She could feel it coming. Kathy stopped right in front of them and, without missing a beat, glared at the triplets before speaking. Kathy, bluntly, "You all still comfortable? Make sure your bags are under the seats, all right?" Lisa, taking a deep breath, but speaking firmly, "Everything's fine. Thank you." Kathy didn't reply right away. Instead, she looked at the bags near the children's feet. Her gaze seemed to linger on them. And then, almost imperceptibly, Kathy shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Kathy," almost too casually, "just checking. We can't have people storing items they're not supposed to carry. It's standard procedure." Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. She had heard it before. The words that signaled she was being watched. Her children were being treated like criminals, as if they were carrying something they had no right to possess. There were no words in Kathy's accusation, just a heavy silence that settled over the entire aisle. Aaron, confused, "We're just sitting here. What do you mean storing items?" Kathy, clipping her words, "Just making sure. Protocol." There it was, the excuse. The perfect mask for a bias she knew all too well. Kathy was hiding behind the guise of protocol, something she could use to justify whatever action she wanted to take. But Lisa saw through it, and despite her nerves, she wasn't about to back down. Lisa, sharp with a flash of anger. You've already accused us without reason. We're not breaking any rules. Kathy, defensive. I didn't accuse you. I'm just doing my job. Don't make this worse. The word worse hung in the air, a threat disguised as a warning. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that there was no going back now. She was about to stand up for her children, for herself, and for everyone who had ever faced this kind of discrimination. Lisa could feel the camera phones flicking on, their red recording lights flickering in the corner of her eye. She took a deep breath, pulled out her phone, and started recording. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. Lisa, calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm recording this. I'm doing it because this is racial profiling. This is exactly how black people get treated in public spaces every single day. The words landed like a bombshell. The plane went silent. Passengers who had once whispered now looked directly at the scene unfolding before them. Some recorded it, some stared, while others seemed to shrink into their seats. The weight of what was happening settled in. This wasn't just a confrontation on a plane. This was something much larger. It was a fight for dignity, for truth, and for the simple right to exist without being accused. I'll call security if I have to. You can't just make accusations in the middle of a flight. Lisa, not backing down. You're the one making accusations. You don't get to treat us like this and get away with it. Security guard, approaching cautiously. What seems to be the problem here? Kathy, pointing. These two are stealing. I saw them hide merchandise in their bags. Lisa, furious. We're not stealing. We've been shopping. This is a setup. Security guard, hesitant, unsure. Please, remain calm. Let's check your bags. The security guard's words were like a deflection. They were supposed to de-escalate, but all they did was give legitimacy to Kathy's accusations. Lisa's mind raced. They were being treated as criminals. An injustice of it made her heart ache. But Lisa knew that standing up was the only way forward. She wasn't going to let this moment pass without a fight. It wasn't just Lisa who had had enough. The passengers around them started to murmur, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. One by one, they began to speak up, realizing the injustice unfolding before them. A man in the back stood up, his voice strong and clear. Passenger 1, firm. This is wrong. I've been watching them. They've done nothing wrong. Passenger 2, quiet but firm. Everyone can see what's happening. You're treating them differently because of their skin color. The tide was turning. Kathy's face flushed with embarrassment as the passengers voiced their support for Lisa and her family. And then, just as quickly as it had escalated, the storm began to calm. The security guard looked around, finally understanding the weight of the situation. Security guard hesitant. All right, I think we can let this go. And just like that, the accusation crumbled. Kathy stood in front of them, her mouth open, her apology stuck in the back of her throat. She had lost a battle, but Lisa and her children had won a small victory. They hadn't let the injustice stand, but the fight wasn't over. The plane was still in the air, and the consequences of Kathy's actions had only just begun to unfold. Lisa knew that the next step would be to fight for justice off this plane. This wasn't just about a wrongful accusation. This was about something larger than them. When the airline scrambles to hide the turbulence it caused itself. Direct hit. If you believe that every voice matters, hit like. Comment where you're watching from, and we'll release Hour 2 when you're awake. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories because truth needs to travel at the speed of justice. The air in the cabin felt different now. What was once a space of excitement, filled with laughter and the promise of adventure, now felt suffocating. The sound of the plane's engines was still steady, but to Lisa, it sounded like a distant drumbeat, steady but unnerving. Her children, one so full of energy and curiosity, now sat quietly, their eyes wide, unsure what was happening. The flight attendants moved down the aisles again, but Kathy was nowhere to be seen. Lisa wasn't sure whether that was a relief or a warning. Aaron, quietly, staring out the window. "Mom, why is everyone staring at us?" Lisa looked around. The cabin, which had been bustling with conversation, was now filled with hushed whispers and nervous glances. A few passengers in the rows ahead seemed to be sneaking looks at her and her children, trying to avoid eye contact. Others pretended to be absorbed in their screens. But Lisa could feel their eyes lingering on them, judging them. Lisa, softly, more to herself than to her son. Because they don't know what to think, Aaron, and that's the problem. She had never wanted to teach her children these lessons, the ones about bias, about racial prejudice. But today, they were learning them the hard way. The silence that had settled over the cabin was heavy. The conversations that once filled the air had dwindled to nothing more than murmurs. It was as though the passengers were afraid to speak. But Lisa wasn't sure if they were afraid of the situation or afraid of being seen for what they were. Silent witnesses to injustice. A woman sitting in front of them, probably in her late 40s, well-dressed with pearls around her neck, turned to glance at Lisa. Her eyes flicked to the triplets, then back to Lisa, but she quickly looked away when their eyes met. Lisa, to herself, "Do you see it too? Are you uncomfortable? Or are you just hoping it goes away?" But it didn't go away. The looks were persistent, uncomfortable, like she and her children were out of place in a space they had every right to be in. A man sitting 2 rows behind Lisa cleared his throat and then spoke to his seatmate in a low voice. Passenger 1 whispering, "I can't believe they're doing this to them. They haven't done anything wrong." Lisa stiffened at the sound of the words. He wasn't speaking to her, but the words cut through the stillness like a knife. Passenger 2 whispering back, "I know, this isn't right, but what can we do? They're just kids." The conversation was quiet, but Lisa heard every word. She wasn't sure what bothered her more, the fact that people were speaking up, or the fact that no one had spoken up sooner. Her mind raced. It was always the same, wasn't it? The quiet, the watching, the waiting for someone else to do something. People didn't want to make waves, especially not when it came to confronting their own biases. But they were wrong. The wave had already started, and she wasn't going to let it crash over her children again. Kathy's return. Then, just as the tension seemed to reach its peak, Kathy reappeared. She walked down the aisle, her stride purposeful, but her eyes never quite met Lisa's. Kathy was holding a drink cart, her hand shaking slightly as she pushed it along. Lisa noticed the way Kathy's face flushed when she caught Lisa's eye, and it was clear that Kathy was avoiding her gaze. Kathy, voice forced, a thin smile plastered on her face. "Everything all right here? I'll be happy to serve you some drinks." Lisa didn't trust the smile. It was the same kind of smile people put on when they knew they'd cross a line, but didn't want to admit it. Lisa, coldly, "Funny how now you want to serve us." Kathy, awkward, trying to laugh it off. "Oh, I just wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable." Lisa could see Kathy's discomfort, but it didn't change the fact that the damage had already been done. The accusations, the stares. Everything was already in motion, and Kathy wasn't going to stop it. Aaron murmuring, "Mom, she's acting weird." Lisa, gently but firmly, "You're right, Aaron. She is." The flight is now their battlefield. The service cart moved forward, but Lisa's mind didn't follow it. Instead, it kept drifting back to Kathy and the incident. How could she have let this happen? How could she have let her children be treated like this without a fight? But Lisa knew the fight had already begun. It wasn't just about getting her kids a drink anymore. It wasn't just about one unjust accusation. It was about the system that allowed this to happen over and over again without ever being questioned. Lisa, thinking, voice firm, "I'm not letting this go." The thought struck her like lightning. She wasn't going to let this be another moment of silent suffering. She was going to make sure this moment had a name, a face, and a voice. Lisa's hand slipped into her bag, and she pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. She glanced at her children, who were staring at her, unsure of what was going on, but they weren't afraid anymore. They were waiting. Lisa, with quiet resolve, "Get ready, kids. This is our moment." Lisa opened her phone and started recording. She held out in front of her, making sure Kathy saw it. Kathy's eyes flicked to the screen, and then quickly darted away. But it was too late. Lisa's voice rang out, steady and firm. Lisa, into the phone. I'm recording this because this is racial profiling. This is what happens when people see black people in public spaces and automatically assume the worst. My children are being treated as criminals without reason, without proof, and we are not going to take it. The words hung in the air, thick with truth. Kathy's face flushed, her eyes darting to the other passengers. But the damage had been done. People were watching. People were recording. And the truth, no matter how much Kathy wanted to deny it, was now out in the open. The first witness. Passenger 1 from behind. I'm with her. You don't get to treat them like this. They've done nothing wrong. The words hit like a shockwave. Lisa's heart soared at the sound of them, but it wasn't just about the words. It was about the support, the truth that was finally being spoken, the voices that were no longer silent. Passenger 2 from the front row. I saw everything. They've been nothing but polite. This isn't right. And just like that, the tide began to shift. Kathy looked around, her eyes wide, and for the first time, the weight of her actions seemed to sink in. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She couldn't hide behind her uniform or her protocol anymore. The truth was in the air now, and it wasn't going anywhere. Kathy stepped back, her voice wavering as she addressed the passengers. Kathy, voice shaking. I'll call security. If you think this is going to go unpunished, you're mistaken. Lisa, calm, resolute. Call them. It's time to face the truth. The tension is palpable as Kathy hesitates, the passengers holding their breath. But as the plane descended and the final descent lights blinked on, Lisa realized that the battle was only beginning. The truth had wings now, and it was about to fly faster than anyone had expected. If this story moved you, hit like to share it with more people. Comment where you're watching from, and tell us if you've ever faced injustice. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories, because this fight isn't over, and we need your voice to help carry the truth. The stillness of the plane was shattered by the soft whirring of Kathy's voice. Lisa's heart slammed against her ribcage, her pulse racing as the weight of the moment settled over her. This was a turning point, the moment everything would change, not just for her and her children, but for everyone on board. Kathy, abruptly, loud enough for the cabin to hear. I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to step aside. There's been a misunderstanding. Lisa, shocked, standing up. What are you talking about? Kathy, eyes darting nervously toward the other passengers. I'm asking to check your bags. There's been a situation, and I've noticed some suspicious behavior. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Kathy's voice was shaky now, her confidence eroding as her accusation hung in the air like a cloud waiting to burst. Lisa's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. They were just flying to their destination, to enjoy their time together. But now, something had changed. Lisa, voice trembling but steady. What are you accusing us of? Kathy, stepping closer, forcing a tight smile. You've been acting suspicious. I saw you hide something in your bags when you were walking down the aisle. I'm going to have to check. The accusation came so suddenly, so viciously, that Lisa felt her knees go weak beneath her. Her mind screamed in disbelief. This was happening. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about a shopping cart or an incident at the airport. It was about the color of their skin. Lisa had known something was off, but now it was as clear as day. Aaron, stepping forward, voice shaking. We're not stealing anything. We're just sitting here. The flight attendants had been busy serving the other passengers, chatting, smiling, making small talk. But now, the whole cabin fell silent, all eyes on row 14. The passengers in front and behind turned in their seats, some peeking over their shoulders, others subtly pulling out their phones to record. The truth was slowly unraveling, but it wasn't fast enough. Alex, gripping his seat tightly, voice barely above a whisper. Why us, Mom? Why are they doing this? Lisa, soft, a tight knot in her throat. Because they think we're guilty just by being here. And they're wrong. Tears stung at the corners of Lisa's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't break down in front of her children, not now. She had to be their shield, their protector, but the truth was undeniable. Her children were being treated as criminals, accused of something they hadn't done. The confrontation escalates. Kathy, raising her voice slightly, trying to assert control. Look, I saw what I saw. I'm not going to let anyone steal in my store, even if we're in the air. I'm calling security. Derek, Lisa's 18-year-old nephew, who had been silent until now, stands up. You can't just accuse us like this. We've done nothing wrong. We haven't stolen anything. Derek's voice cracked with frustration, but it was enough. The authority of his presence, strong, calm, cut through the rising tension. He stood tall, trying to be the voice of reason in the chaos. Lisa knew her nephew had always been a protector, the one who kept the peace. But now, he was fighting for more than just their dignity. He was fighting for their right to exist in peace. Kathy, sneering under her breath, "You're not fooling anyone. You think you can just walk in here and take whatever you want." Lisa, shocked, standing her ground. "That's exactly what you think. You've already made up your mind about us." It wasn't just about the accusation anymore. It wasn't even about the bags. It was about something much deeper. The instinctive prejudice that people had toward others, especially when those others didn't fit their narrow view of who was worthy of respect. Lisa could feel it, the weight of the stairs, the heavy silence that surrounded her family like a storm cloud. The other passengers had stopped whispering. Now too afraid to speak up, Kathy had already decided who was guilty. The stand. Lisa, raising her voice defiant. "This is racial profiling. You're treating us like criminals for no reason other than the color of our skin. You have no right to accuse us." The words echoed in the cabin. The injustice, the truth, fell over the passengers like a blanket. For the first time, the crowd around them seemed to shift. Some looked uncomfortable. Some started to fidget in their seats. But others looked at Lisa and the triplets with a quiet, growing solidarity. Passenger 1, from across the aisle, standing up slowly. "She's right. You're accusing them for nothing." Passenger 2, speaking up now, her voice trembling. "Stop treating them like this. They've done nothing wrong." And just like that, a ripple began to spread across the cabin. It wasn't just Lisa fighting anymore. Now, the passengers who had witnessed the injustice were joining in. And Lisa wasn't alone. Her family wasn't alone. The silent observers who had once been afraid to speak up were now finding their voices. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The viral moment. Lisa pulled her phone out of her pocket. She had to make sure the truth was documented, that there was evidence of what was happening. She raised the camera in Kathy's direction, her fingers trembling just slightly as she hit the record button. Lisa, to the camera, speaking calmly but with a fierce undertone. "I'm recording this. This is what racial profiling looks like. This is how people are treated for no reason other than the color of their skin." The plane fell into an even heavier silence. Kathy froze, her mouth open as she realized what was happening. She had crossed a line, and the consequences were coming slowly, but unmistakably. Kathy, shifting, clearly panicked. "You think this is going to help you? You're making this worse for yourself." But Lisa didn't flinch. She kept the phone steady, her gaze unwavering as she spoke. The words she spoke weren't just for Kathy. They were for everyone who had ever been made to feel less than. The passengers who had remained silent for so long were now witnesses, and they couldn't look away. The video, with its quiet authority, didn't just capture the moment. It made it real. The moment it was uploaded, the world started to see the truth. The passengers in the cabin now had to reconcile what they had seen with their own personal beliefs. And while some remained silent, others began to speak up, joining in the fight for justice. Passenger 3, shouting across the aisle, voice growing stronger. "You can't just treat people like this because you're uncomfortable." Passenger 4, nodding, voice steady. "We see it. You can't ignore it anymore." The tide had turned. Kathy's posture faltered, her face flushing with embarrassment, her earlier confidence unraveling in the face of undeniable truth. She had underestimated the power of what Lisa was doing. She had underestimated how far a mother would go to defend her children. The engines hummed steadily, but the air around Lisa felt thick with something heavier than just altitude. The turbulence wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Every passing moment dragged the family deeper into a storm they hadn't chosen to fly into. The accusations continued to hang in the air, heavier than the clouds outside. Lisa's phone remained in her hand, still recording. The light from the screen was the only thing keeping the family grounded. It was the only thing that could offer any sense of truth to this lie that Kathy and some of the other passengers had constructed around them. But as the minutes dragged on, it was clear that they weren't just in a fight for their dignity. They were in a battle for their very humanity. Kathy, now visibly flustered, walked back and forth along the aisle, occasionally stopping to glance at Lisa. Every time she did, Lisa locked eyes with her, unwavering, determined. Kathy's earlier arrogance had completely dissolved, replaced by a twitching anxiety. Her hands trembled as she gripped the drink cart, pushing it up and down the aisle, but always making sure to steer clear of row 14. Lisa noticed Kathy's glances becoming less direct, like she was afraid to face them now. Still, Kathy couldn't hide the coldness in her expression when she returned to their row. She stood there for a moment, staring, but not speaking. Kathy, finally breaking the silence, her voice tight. "I'm not letting this go. I'll have you removed when we land." Lisa, without hesitation. "Removed for what? For standing up for my children? For refusing to let you treat us like criminals?" Kathy, angrily. "You think you're above the law? This isn't how it works." But Lisa wasn't above the law. She was simply demanding to be treated as an equal. And that's exactly what Kathy couldn't stand. The uniform Kathy wore didn't just give her authority. It gave her power over others. And when Lisa refused a bow to that power, Kathy's grip began to slip. The low murmurs of other passengers grew louder. Some were whispering their support, their discomfort with Kathy's actions spilling into the open. Others, unwilling to be silent anymore, began to voice their opinions. Passenger 3, calm but firm. "This is ridiculous. We all saw what happened. They didn't do anything wrong." Passenger 4, standing up. "Yeah, what is this, a setup? Just because they're black?" The words weren't just words anymore. They were a tidal wave crashing into Kathy's smug demeanor. The silence that had once been her weapon had evaporated, replaced by voices that refused to stay quiet. Passenger 5, holding up their phone, recording. "I'm getting this on camera. It's time to expose what's going on here." Lisa could feel the air shift, the cabin tightening, as more people started to speak up. The support she had been hoping for, the voices she had longed to hear, were finally making themselves heard. Kathy's face contorted with frustration, but there was no turning back now. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, just enough to jolt the passengers in their seats. The seatbelt sign blinked on, and the overhead bins rattled. But the physical turbulence paled in comparison to what was happening around them. As the plane wobbled slightly in the air, Lisa felt the turbulence in her chest, her heartbeat pulsing in sync with the unease that filled the cabin. Her children sat beside her, their hands trembling. Aaron squeezed Alex's hand, trying to offer him some semblance of comfort. Austin, on the other hand, remained unusually quiet, his eyes wide, taking in the chaos unfolding before him. Aaron, leaning closer to Lisa. "Mom, what's going to happen? Are we going to be okay?" Lisa, smiling through the anxiety, but firm. "We're going to be fine, sweetheart. We just need to stand tall. Keep calm." But no matter how calm Lisa tried to sound, she could feel the anger growing inside her. Every word Kathy had said, every glance from the other passengers, chipped away at the peace she had tried to hold on to. She had known injustice existed. But this was a different beast entirely. This wasn't just a single moment. It was the entire system of oppression that had followed them into the sky. The sound of footsteps approaching was a signal that things were about to get worse. A security officer, tall and broad-shouldered, appeared at the front of the aisle. He walked toward row 14 with a slow, deliberate pace, his eyes scanning the entire cabin as if he was walking into a battlefield. Security guard gruff, authoritative. "What seems to be the problem here?" Kathy, gesturing toward Lisa and the children. "These people are causing trouble. I've seen them hide things in their bags. They're stealing, and I'm not going to let them get away with it." Lisa stood tall, her voice cutting through the charged silence like a blade. Lisa, calm but firm. This is not about stealing. This is about racial profiling. My children are being accused for no reason other than the color of their skin. If you're going to check us, check the whole plane. There's no evidence here. Security guard, looking at Kathy, unsure. You're accusing them of what? Kathy, still flustered but defensive. I saw what I saw. I'm not imagining this. But the security guard wasn't convinced. His eyes shifted from Kathy to Lisa, to the children. The weight of the situation was settling in. Kathy had made a bold accusation, but Lisa's calm presence, her unwavering conviction, had made him question everything. A deep silence descended once again. This time, it wasn't just about Kathy or the security guard. It was about the passengers. The phone cameras were still rolling, and Lisa could see the passengers around them beginning to shift in their seats. Passenger 6, low but resolute. They've been sitting there the whole time. Nothing has happened. This is wrong. Lisa's chest swelled with a mixture of anger and relief. People were finally speaking up, finally recognizing what was happening. For the first time in hours, she felt something like hope. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs too. But Kathy wasn't done yet. She wasn't about to let go of her accusation, no matter how many people spoke up. And that meant Lisa had to hold her ground even more firmly. Kathy, voice shaking, her anger rising. I'm not going to let you get away with this. I've had enough. I'll call the police when we land, and you will regret this. Lisa, steady, unwavering. Go ahead. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not afraid of you. The plane's engines roared, cutting through the silence like a warning. Kathy stood at the front of row 14, her hands trembling at her sides. But she couldn't hold on to the control she thought she had anymore. The passengers were no longer just passive observers. They were witnesses, and they were ready to make sure this injustice wouldn't go unchallenged. Kathy turned to the security guard, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. Call the police, she shouted, her voice rising higher than it should have. But as the guard hesitated, another voice echoed from the back of the cabin. Passenger 7 from behind. Don't call the police. This isn't a crime. It's a lie. Narrator, low, intense. The truth was finally louder than the lies. The question was no longer if Kathy would apologize. It was whether the airline would ever recognize the damage caused by a single moment of unchecked prejudice. As the plane descended, Lisa knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened next, she had already won. If this story moved you, hit like, share this video, because the truth can't be ignored any longer. Comment where you're watching from, and tell us if you've ever been through something like this. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories, because justice takes flight when we stand together. As Kathy retreated, the cabin settled into a quiet, uneasy calm. But this calm wasn't peaceful. It was a calm before the storm. Lisa could feel it in her bones. The rest of the flight would be a test, not just of her resolve, but of the people around her. This moment wasn't just about her and her children anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced, everyone who had ever been treated like they didn't belong. The plane continued its descent, the city below beginning to take shape. But the world had shifted. Nothing was the same anymore, not after what had happened on this flight, not after this battle had begun. Cliffhanger for Chapter 7, The Truth. Narrator, building intensity. Lisa knew that when they landed, there would be consequences, but she wasn't afraid anymore. The truth had wings now, and it was about to fly faster than anyone could have anticipated. Narrator, low, with anticipation. Next, the truth, when the evidence clears their name, but the real battle is only just beginning. If you believe justice should never be silenced, hit like to spread the word. Comment where you're watching from, and share your thoughts on racial profiling. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories, because the truth has to fly free. Let's keep pushing for change. Outro music builds, soft strings, followed by a gradual fade out. The sound of the engines never seemed so loud. The rhythmic hum of the jet engines, the quiet murmurs of the other passengers, the clinking of trays being pushed down the aisle, it all blended into a distant buzz. But beneath the surface, Lisa felt a heaviness, a weight that only seemed to grow the further they descended toward their destination. The cabin had gone quiet after the confrontation. The passengers who had once whispered their discomfort were now silent. No one spoke up. No one challenged Kathy anymore. They were witnesses now, some standing behind Lisa, others shrinking away, afraid to be seen. The silence felt suffocating. And yet, there was something in that silence, something that forced Lisa to confront the truth that had been hanging in the air for hours. Silence in the face of injustice wasn't just complicity. It was a weapon. Lisa's phone screen still glowed softly in her lap, the video recording of the confrontation still running. She hadn't stopped it. She couldn't stop it. Every second felt more important than the last. And every second brought the family closer to a resolution they didn't know how to prepare for. But it wasn't just about the recording anymore. The video wasn't just a document. It wasn't just proof. It was a lifeline, a way to show the world what had happened, to make the truth undeniable, no matter how much Kathy tried to erase it. The minutes stretched on, each one heavier than the last. Lisa glanced at her children. Aaron, Alex, and Austin sat in their seats, staring out the window or down at their laps. They were silent, too silent. The joy they had carried with them onto the plane had evaporated, replaced by confusion, frustration, and something far deeper, a sense of alienation. Aaron, who had always been the most outgoing, now sat with his arms crossed, his face tight, his usual smile gone. Alex, usually lost in his world of books, was staring blankly at the seat in front of him, lost in thought. Austin, ever the playful one, had grown eerily quiet. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, his small face etched with confusion. Aaron, quietly, breaking the silence. "Mom, is this what happens every time we go somewhere?" Lisa, sighing, her voice soft but firm. "No, Aaron, this isn't how it's supposed to be. But sometimes this is what happens. People judge us before they even know us." Lisa's words felt like the air being slowly let out of a balloon, deflating, sinking. She hadn't expected to have this conversation today. Not on a plane, not with her children, not like this. But here they were, in the middle of a fight they didn't even start. And the worst part? She could see it in their eyes. They knew exactly why Kathy had treated them this way. Because it wasn't about what they had done. It was about who they were. And that truth was harder to swallow than anything else. A passenger speaks up. The quiet in the cabin stretched on, but it wasn't absolute. Out of nowhere, a voice rose above the rest, cutting through the uncomfortable stillness. It was the voice of a man, one of the passengers who had been sitting a few rows ahead. He had been watching everything unfold, his eyes flicking between Lisa, her children, and Kathy. And now, as the silence weighed down on them, he finally stood up, his voice steady but filled with quiet conviction. Passenger 1, standing up, voice clear and calm. "Excuse me, but I've been watching this entire situation unfold, and I've got to say something. This isn't right. I saw these people when they boarded. They were excited, just like any other passengers. They weren't doing anything wrong. You can't accuse them like this, not without evidence." The cabin shifted. For the first time in hours, a ripple of support spread through the room. The passengers' words echoed in the quiet, breaking the tension that had seemed to suffocate everyone. Kathy, caught off guard, looked up at him, her lips trembling slightly. Kathy, defensive, but quieter than before. "I'm just doing my job. I saw something, and I'm following procedure." Passenger 2, a woman from the row behind, speaking up. "Your procedure is broken. What you're doing is wrong. You're accusing them because of their skin color, and everyone here can see it." It was a small act of defiance, but it was enough to create a crack in the dam. More voices began to join in, murmurs of support from passengers who had been too afraid to speak earlier. One by one, they spoke out, and the tide started to turn. But Lisa wasn't looking at Kathy anymore. She was looking at her children, at their faces, their wide eyes, and the uncertainty that had replaced the excitement they had felt when they first boarded the plane. The plane continued its course, but the air had changed. No one was pretending anymore. The truth was out in the open, and no one could ignore it. Kathy's massive authority had slipped. The passengers around her had begun to take a stand, each word louder than the last, and Lisa's children, despite their fear, began to find their own voices. Aaron, with quiet defiance, to Kathy. You can check our bags. You can do whatever you want, but you can't change who we are. We're just trying to get to where we're going, just like everyone else. It was a turning point. The words were simple, but they were powerful. Lisa saw it in Aaron's eyes. He was speaking for all of them now. He wasn't going to let fear control them. And that, right there, was the moment she knew things would never be the same. Kathy's response. But Kathy wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. She stood frozen for a moment, her eyes darting nervously around the cabin, scanning the faces of the passengers who were now watching her. The flight attendant was caught between the truth she didn't want to face and the authority she thought she still had. Finally, her shoulders slumped, her posture slouched in defeat. She turned on her heel and walked away, her hand still gripping the drink cart as though it could offer her some semblance of control. Kathy, voice shaking as she walks away. I'll have you removed from the flight when we land. You'll see. But Lisa knew. She knew this wasn't over. But in this moment, they had won something. They had stood their ground, and they had done it together. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot, but it was a victory. They had exposed the truth for what it was. As Kathy retreated, the cabin settled into a quiet, uneasy calm. But this calm wasn't peaceful. It was the calm before the storm. Lisa could feel it in her bones. The rest of the flight would be a test, not just her resolve, but the people around her. This moment wasn't just about her and her children anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced, everyone who had ever been treated like they didn't belong. The plane continued its descent, the city below beginning to take shape. But the world had shifted. Nothing was the same anymore, not after what had happened on this flight, not after this battle. Lisa knew that when they landed, there would be consequences, but she wasn't afraid anymore. The truth had wings now, and it was about to fly faster than anyone could have anticipated. If you believe justice should never be silenced, hit like to spread the word. Comment where you're watching from, and share your thoughts on racial profiling. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories, because the truth has to fly free. Let's keep pushing for change. Kathy's grip on the situation faltered, and Lisa's resolve strengthened. But with the battle won, the war is far from over. The aftermath is coming, and justice is within reach. But the fight is just beginning. The plane's descent was smooth, but the tension in the cabin was palpable. What should have been a routine landing had become the backdrop for a battle far larger than a mere misunderstanding on a flight. Kathy, now retreating into back of the cabin, had tried to maintain control, but Lisa had managed to shatter her facade. The truth had made its mark, but the question remained, would the truth be enough to free them from the unjust accusations? Lisa felt the quiet hum of the engines beneath her seat as the plane began its descent into the airport. Her phone was still recording, its screen glowing softly. The video had already gone viral. People had seen the injustice unfold before their eyes. The question now was what would happen when they landed. Kathy had threatened them with removal, but Lisa knew that her actions and the actions of the passengers who had supported her had already set something in motion that couldn't be undone. As the plane touched down, Lisa took a deep breath. She glanced over at her children, who were still silent, but their faces had changed. The fear that had once clouded their eyes was slowly being replaced with a look of defiance. They had been through so much, but now they were starting to see that their mother's fight was their fight too. Austin whispering, "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Lisa, smiling, voice filled with warmth. "We're going to be more than okay, baby. The world is watching, and we're not going anywhere." As the plane rolled to stop on the runway, the door was slowly opened. Lisa felt a knot in her stomach as the security personnel, along with airport officials, approached the plane. She knew this moment was inevitable, but she was ready. The truth was already out there. The video, the passengers who had witnessed injustice, the support, they had all set the stage for what was about to happen. The question now was how the airline would respond. The airplane door opened, and a gust of warm air rushed in, mingling with the cold tension that had built over the past few hours. Lisa stood, gripping the armrest as she carefully unbuckled her seatbelt. Her children followed her lead, moving slowly but with purpose. As they exited the plane, the ground crew's eyes locked onto them. A man in a dark suit, clearly an airport official, stepped forward. His face was impassive, but there was a hint of something behind his eyes, guilt, maybe, or recognition. He'd seen the footage. He knew what had happened, but he had to play his part. Airport official, coldly, "Ms. Blackwell, we'll need to speak with you about the incident that occurred on board. Please follow me." Lisa, calm but firm, "I'm happy to talk, but I'll be doing it with my lawyer. We've already made it clear that this was an incident of racial profiling." Lisa didn't flinch as the official's expression stiffened. She knew that, even though the truth was in plain view, they were still going to try to downplay it, try to minimize what had happened. She had come prepared for that. Her lawyer, Cynthia, was already on her way to the airport. She had been alerted as soon as the video went viral. As Lisa and her children were escorted to a waiting area, the mood was heavy. The weight of what had happened, the stares from bystanders, the whispers. Lisa could feel them all pressing in on her, but she held her ground. She had done nothing wrong. They had done nothing wrong. And now, the truth was going to make sure that the world knew that. The door of the waiting room opened, and Cynthia walked in. Lisa immediately felt a wave of relief wash over her as she saw her lawyer's familiar, calm demeanor. Cynthia was a seasoned professional, an expert in cases like this, and Lisa had trusted her with this fight from beginning. Cynthia, stepping forward, a reassuring smile. "Lisa, I've seen the video. I've spoken to the airline's legal team. They're aware of what happened. But now, we need to make sure they know that we're not backing down." Lisa, nodding. "Good. Let's make sure they understand that we'll go all the way if we have to." Lisa's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down and saw dozens of notifications popping up on the screen. The video had gone viral. More than 500,000 views in the last hour. The hashtag Justice for Blackwell Family was trending. Lisa's chest tightened as she read the comments. But there was something else, too. A message from the CEO of the airline, Mr. Dalton. CEO message. "Ms. Blackwell, I've been made aware of the situation. I deeply regret the incident and would like to speak with you as soon as possible. We take these matters seriously and are investigating the actions of our staff." Lisa's fingers hovered over the screen. She could feel her blood boil at the tone of the message. He was apologizing, but there was no real accountability. No real apology. Just damage control. And Lisa knew this was only the beginning of what would be a long fight. Lisa, to Cynthia, determined, "I'll take this conversation, but I want it recorded. No more apologies. We want action." The quiet tension was broken by the loud sound of a ringing phone. Cynthia reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her eyes flicked to Lisa, and she answered with a nod. The conversation with the CEO had begun. Cynthia, on the phone, voice firm. "Mr. Dalton, I'm sure you're aware of the situation. The video has already gone viral. We have video evidence and witnesses. The actions of your employees are indefensible. It's time for your company to take responsibility." Lisa stood silently as Cynthia spoke. For the first time in hours, she felt a glimmer of hope. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. Kathy's actions had been exposed, and the company was being forced to confront the truth. Lisa, whispering to herself, "They're going to pay for this." As Cynthia spoke to the CEO, Lisa felt a surge of adrenaline. It wasn't just about what had happened on the plane anymore. It was about something much bigger. It was about standing up, not just for her family, but for every person who had ever faced this kind of injustice. Cynthia, on the phone, voice resolute. "We want an apology. We want your staff to undergo proper training. And we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. This isn't just a legal matter. It's a matter of dignity." For the first time in her life, Lisa felt like she was truly fighting for something greater. She wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for every black person who had ever been accused of something they didn't do, simply because of the color of their skin. She was standing up for the next person who would have to face what she and her children had faced that day. And she wasn't going to stop until justice was served. As the conversation ended, Cynthia hung up the phone, her face serious but determined. The ground had shifted beneath them, but the battle was far from over. Cynthia, to Lisa, quietly, "They're offering a settlement, but we're not taking it. We're going to court." And just like that, the next chapter began. The truth had been told, but the fight for justice was only just starting. When the truth lands, and so do the consequences. If this story resonated with you, hit like to share it. Comment where you're watching from, and let us know your thoughts on the injustice that's been exposed here. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories, because the fight for justice doesn't stop when we land. The plane's engines hummed louder now, the low vibrations in the cabin mirroring the tension that had been building for hours. What should have been an ordinary flight had turned into a living nightmare. Lisa Blackwell stared out the window, her fingers still gripping her phone tightly. The recording had captured everything. The accusations, the fight, the support, the tension, and it had already made its way across the internet. The world was watching now. As the aircraft descended, Lisa's thoughts were a mix of determination and exhaustion. She wasn't sure what awaited them on the ground, but she was certain of one thing. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fasten seatbelt sign flickered on, and the plane began its descent toward the runway. Lisa glanced at her children, who were seated next to her, still too quiet, still too shaken. Aaron quietly, "Mom, what happens now?" Lisa, softly but firmly, "What happens now as we land? We make sure we have everything on record, and we fight. We fight for our dignity. We fight for what's right." She had never wanted to teach her children this lesson. Not this way, not at 30,000 feet. But here they were, on the front lines of a battle they didn't ask for. Lisa could feel the eyes of the entire plane on them now. They weren't just passengers anymore. They were the story. And while the tension in the cabin was palpable, it was nothing compared to what was waiting for them on the ground. The plane finally touched down, its wheels making contact with the tarmac. A loud thud reverberated through the cabin, but the noise was drowned by the silence that followed. The passengers remained motionless, some still holding their phones, others pretending to look away. The tension hung in the air like thick fog. The seatbelt sign switched off, but no one moved immediately. The flight attendants, once so brisk in their movements, now appeared nervous as they moved down the aisle. Kathy, who had been largely silent since the confrontation, was nowhere to be seen. Lisa felt a small sense of victory knowing that the truth had finally caught up with her. As the plane taxied toward the gate, Lisa's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Cynthia, her lawyer. "Cynthia, a message. The airline is offering a settlement. They're desperate to resolve this quietly, but we're not going to let them sweep this under the rug. We go public with this. You have to be prepared for what happens next." Lisa, whispering to herself, "They want to silence us, but we're not going anywhere." Lisa didn't reply to the message. There was no need. She knew exactly what Cynthia was saying. The airline wanted to settle, to offer some compensation, and move on as if nothing had happened. But Lisa wasn't having it. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. This wasn't about money. This was about justice. As the plane rolled to stop at the gate, the door opened. Lisa's heart beat faster as she saw the ground crew waiting. 2 security officers in black uniforms stood just inside the doorway, their eyes scanning the cabin. A third person, a man dressed in a suit, stood beside them. Lisa couldn't see his face from her seat, but she could feel his gaze. He was waiting for them. Security officer, calm but authoritative. "Ms. Blackwell, we'll need you to step off the plane. We have to speak with you." Lisa stood up slowly, her body stiff from the long hours of sitting, but her resolve was stronger than ever. The triplets followed suit, their eyes wide, but they didn't say a word. Lisa felt a slight nudge of pride. They were watching her. They were seeing what it meant to fight, even when the odds were stacked against you. She stepped into the aisle, the children beside her. The other passengers avoided her gaze, some still pretending to be lost in their phones, others stealing quick glances. No one spoke. No one wanted to say the words that everyone was thinking. The security officers approached them as the passengers shuffled off the plane. The man in the suit stepped forward. Man in suit calm, but with a hint of unease. "Ms. Blackwell, I'm Brian Dalton. I'm the CEO of this airline. We need to speak to you about what happened on the flight." Lisa's eyes narrowed. She knew what he was about to say. He was here to apologize, to offer a quick fix. But Lisa wasn't interested in apologies. She wanted accountability. Lisa, stepping forward, her voice steady. "I don't need your apology, Mr. Dalton. I need you to fix this. I need you to make sure that what happened to us doesn't happen again. My children were treated like criminals for no reason, and I will not let this go." "Brian Dalton," his voice faltering slightly, "we're investigating this matter. I understand that you're upset." Lisa, interrupting. "Upset? This isn't about being upset. This is about my family being falsely accused, humiliated, and degraded. If this is how you run your airline, then you need to change. I'm not going to stand by while you pretend this didn't happen." The words hit Brian Dalton like a wave crashing against the shore. He had come here to smooth things over, to get an apology and hope it would be enough. But it wasn't. It was never going to be enough. Not when Lisa had already seen the truth, and now. So had the world. Support from unexpected sources. But just as Dalton opened his mouth to respond, something unexpected happened. One of the passengers from the plane, a middle-aged woman in a business suit, walked up to Lisa. She was calm, composed, and her eyes were filled with determination. Passenger 2, speaking firmly, to Brian Dalton. "Mr. Dalton, I was on that plane. I saw everything. What happened to that family was wrong. They didn't deserve this treatment. I won't stay silent. I'm filing a formal complaint, and I'll make sure others do too." And then another passenger, a man in his 40s with a soft southern accent, stepped forward. Passenger 3, nodding, voice firm. "I'm with her. We all saw it. This wasn't right. I'll be contacting my lawyer as well." One by one, passengers began to speak up. Each voice was small on its own, but together, they formed a chorus of defiance. Lisa could feel the weight of their words, the support they were offering. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Lisa felt the hope she had been desperately searching for. It wasn't just her standing up anymore. It was everyone. As the passengers began to gather their things, Brian Dalton's face turned red. The public pressure was mounting. This wasn't something he could sweep under the rug anymore. He pulled out his phone, his hand shaking slightly as he dialed. "Brian Dalton," into the phone. "I need to speak to our legal team, right now." Lisa watched as he moved away, the urgency in his steps marking a shift. This wasn't just about a bad encounter on a flight anymore. It was about something larger, something that had to be confronted, no matter how much Dalton wanted to ignore it. As the Blackwell family walked toward the exit, the camera flashing from every angle, Lisa couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. There would be a long fight ahead, but they had already won the first battle. They had stood up, they had been heard, and the world was listening. Lisa, to her children, smiling softly. "We did it. We're not backing down." But even as Lisa spoke those words, she knew that this was only the beginning. The fight for justice was never easy, and the road ahead would be long. The airline had already begun to retaliate in ways that Lisa could never have anticipated, but she wasn't going to back down. Not now. If you believe that silence shouldn't stop the truth, hit like, comment where you're watching from, and share your thoughts on what's happening here. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories, because when the truth lands, it never stops. It was over, or so Lisa thought. The incident on the plane was done, and yet the ripple effects of that one moment of racial profiling were just beginning. The truth, though painful, had surfaced. The video of Kathy's false accusations had gone viral, igniting a firestorm of anger, support, and disbelief. But now, in the quiet after the storm, Lisa had to confront something she hadn't prepared for. The fallout. The Blackwell family had left the airport, their heads held high, but the weight of the situation was far from lifted. They still had a long road ahead. The momentary victory felt fragile, like a victory won in the streets, but not yet acknowledged by the institutions that needed to see it. Lisa sat in her living room that evening, surrounded by the quiet of her home. The house was still, save for the sound of her children moving around in the background, trying to return to normal. But the unease that had followed them from the airport was still heavy in the air. The immediate reaction. Narrator, soft, building tension. Lisa's phone buzzed again. She had been avoiding the media calls, but she knew she couldn't avoid them forever. The screen lit up with messages from friends, acquaintances, and, inevitably, journalists. One text stood out. From Cynthia, her lawyer. Cynthia, message. Lisa, the airline's legal team has made a public statement. They've apologized but are offering a settlement. I think it's time to make sure they don't bury this under an NDA. We need to go public with everything. This isn't just about compensation. It's about accountability. Lisa's hand tightened around the phone. The reality was setting in. They weren't just dealing with one flight attendant. They weren't just dealing with one instance of racial profiling. This was a systemic issue. And now, it was a fight for justice, not just for her family, but for everyone who had ever been silenced or diminished because of their skin. Lisa, to herself, I won't let them sweep this under the rug. Not for me, not for my kids, not for anyone. The world was now watching. The video that had been recorded mid-flight had spread like wildfire. News outlets, social media platforms, and online forums were flooded with opinions, debates, and reactions. The hashtag Justice for Blackwell Family trended for days, sparking conversations on racial justice, systemic bias, and public spaces where discrimination thrived. News anchor on TV, voice urgent. In breaking news today, a viral video shows a black family being racially profiled mid-flight on an airline, with a flight attendant accusing them of stealing. The video, posted by Lisa Blackwell, has sparked outrage online, with many calling for accountability and justice. The media frenzy wasn't just focused on the airline anymore. It was focused on the issue that Lisa had highlighted, the deeply ingrained prejudices that were allowed to thrive in public spaces. The conversation had shifted, but it was just the beginning. Lisa's phone rang again. It was Cynthia. Cynthia, on the phone, voice firm. Lisa, it's time. The media is asking for your statement. You've made the right choice to stand your ground, and now we need to be clear about what we want. Lisa, resolute. I'm ready. Let's make sure they know we won't stop fighting until there's real change. I'm not taking a settlement. I'm not backing down. In that moment, Lisa knew this wasn't just a fight for justice for her family. This was a fight for every person who had been mistreated, misjudged, and overlooked. She wasn't just a mother defending her children. She was becoming the face of resistance against a broken system. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, media appearances, and public pressure. Cynthia worked tirelessly to ensure that the airline settlement offer wasn't accepted. They needed to go to court, needed the world to see how deep the problem ran. Lisa's name became synonymous with the fight for racial justice in public spaces. Lisa, during a press conference, voice steady but firm. This is about more than just us. This is about every black person who's ever been treated like a criminal for no reason other than the color of their skin. We won't be silenced. We won't accept sorry. We want real change, real action, and we will not stop until we get it. Lisa's words echoed through the press room. The media was relentless, capturing every word, every gesture. But this was no longer about her or her family. It was about raising awareness, about forcing an uncomfortable conversation. Kathy, the flight attendant, had become a symbol of everything wrong with society's treatment of black individuals. Lisa, by standing firm, had become a beacon of resistance. With immediate attention came overwhelming support. People from across the country reached out, through social media, emails, even phone calls. Lisa's inbox was flooded with messages of solidarity. People offering their stories, their apologies, their support. The video that had once shown a single moment of injustice had now sparked a larger movement, one that Lisa didn't anticipate, but now felt responsible for leading. Supporter emailed to Lisa, "Thank you for speaking out. Your courage is inspiring. We've all faced similar situations, and we're with you." But as with all moments of change, the backlash came quickly. There were people, many people, who believed the airline side of the story, who saw Kathy as a victim of misunderstanding rather than a perpetrator of racial profiling. There were online posts accusing Lisa of playing the race card, of exaggerating the situation. The hatred that came with that backlash was a stark reminder of how deeply rooted these issues were, but also fueled Lisa's resolve. The growing support. Narrator, building with hope. Despite the vitriol, the support for Lisa and her family continued to grow. Civil rights organizations, activist groups, and even celebrities began to speak out. The hashtag Justice for Blackwell Family spread beyond social media and into the streets. Rallies, petitions, and marches were organized in cities across the country. People were coming together, united by a shared belief that something had to change. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than Lisa had expected. She had prepared herself for this moment. But standing in front of the judge, facing the legal team from the airline, she felt the weight of the moment. It wasn't just about this flight or this incident. It was about something much larger. Cynthia, whispering, calm but determined, "We're ready for this. Just remember, you're not alone." Lisa, taking a deep breath, "We've got this." Narrator, the trial began. The airline's legal team tried to downplay the incident, presenting Kathy as a well-meaning employee who simply followed protocol. But Lisa and her lawyer, Cynthia, were ready. The video footage, the witnesses who had spoken up, the passengers who had backed them, all of it played in their favor. The truth, undeniable and clear, was on their side. The moment of victory. Narrator, soft but powerful. After days of testimony, the judge finally made his ruling. The airline was held accountable for its actions, and Kathy was fired for her discriminatory behavior. The court awarded Lisa and her family compensation, not just for the emotional distress, but also for the violation of their rights. But more importantly, the ruling came with a stipulation. The airline would implement mandatory anti-racism training for all its employees, and a public apology would be issued to Lisa and her family. Narrator, with a sense of resolution. Lisa stood in the courtroom, her heart racing as the judge made the ruling. She felt a sense of relief, real, tangible relief, but she also knew that this victory wasn't just for her. It was for every person who had ever been treated unfairly, for every person who had ever been made to feel less than. Cliffhanger for the final chapter, justice. Narrator, building reflective. This wasn't just the end of one fight. It was the beginning of something much larger. The victory had been hard-won, but it was only the start of the real change that was needed. The fight for justice would continue. But for Lisa and her children, they had taken the first step in the long road toward healing, and they knew they would keep walking. Call to action. Narrator, strong, calm. If this story spoke to you, hit like to share it with more people. Comment where you're watching from, and let us know your thoughts on justice and racial profiling. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories, because the fight for equality doesn't end when the case closes. It's just beginning. The courtroom was silent, the tension thick in the air. Lisa Blackwell stood at the front of the room, her back straight, her heart still racing. Her children sat beside her, their faces lit with a mixture of relief and disbelief. This was it, the moment they had been fighting for, the moment they had worked so hard to reach. This wasn't just about an airline. This wasn't just about Kathy or her unjust accusations. This was about something bigger, about every Black person who had been treated unfairly, every person who had faced discrimination because of the color of their skin. This was about making sure that their voices were heard, that their dignity was never again taken for granted. The judge, a stern-looking man in his 60s, sat behind his desk, reviewing the evidence one last time. The room waited with bated breath, as though the air itself held its collective breath. The judge's gavel struck with finality, echoing through the courtroom. Judge calm but with weight. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, the testimony of the witnesses and the fact of the case, I find in favor of the plaintiffs, Ms. Lisa Blackwell and her children. The defendant, the airline, is hereby held accountable for the actions of its staff and for the unjust treatment of the Blackwell family. Lisa felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had known this moment was coming, but hearing the words she had been fighting for, made it feel real. The victory wasn't just hers. It wasn't just her children's. It was a victory for every person who had ever been unjustly accused, for every person who had ever had to fight for basic human dignity. The judge's voice rang out again, this time with a sense of finality. Judge firm. Ms. Blackwell, I order the defendant to issue a formal public apology for the actions of their staff. The airline will also be required to provide compensation for the emotional distress caused, as well as implement mandatory anti-racism training for all employees. The court will oversee the implementation of this policy moving forward. The gavel fell again, but this time it was more than just a judgment. It was a declaration that the truth had won, a declaration that the Blackwell family's fight had been heard and validated. Lisa's hands trembled, but her heart swelled with pride. The relief that washed over her was overwhelming, and for the first time in weeks, she could feel her shoulders relax. The fight wasn't over, not entirely. But today, in this moment, they had won. Back at the airline's headquarters, things were moving quickly. Brian Dalton, the CEO, stood at a podium in front of a sea of reporters, his face pale with the weight of the court's decision. Brian Dalton, apologetic, public relations voice. We deeply regret the incident that occurred with Ms. Blackwell and her family. This situation does not reflect the values of our company. We are taking full responsibility for the actions of our staff and are committed to making the necessary changes. We will issue a public apology and ensure that this never happens again. The apology wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. Lisa had heard the word before, the rehearsed lines, the corporate speak designed to make the incident disappear. But this time, it wasn't going to disappear. Not until the company truly understood what it had done. And it wasn't just about Kathy. It was about the culture that allowed this to happen in the first place. The public apology was issued soon after the court ruling. The airline statement was carefully crafted, with legal teams and PR departments working overtime to ensure that it covered all the necessary points. But no amount of carefully worded statements could undo what had happened. The video that had gone viral had already exposed the truth. The world had already seen the injustice, and now they were demanding change. In the days that followed, Lisa and her children began to feel the weight of what they had accomplished. The video had not only brought attention to their case, but it had sparked a national conversation about racial profiling in public spaces. The Blackwell family had become symbols of resistance, and their victory had given others the courage to speak out as well. The airline had been forced to implement significant changes. Anti-racism training programs were rolled out across all departments, and an internal review of the company's practices was conducted. Kathy, the flight attendant, was fired, and the company issued an official statement to its employees about the importance of respecting all passengers, regardless of their race. But for Lisa, the victory was not just about the changes within the airline. It was about the broader message. It was about what they had shown the world. That no matter the obstacles, no matter the pressure to stay silent, standing up for what was right would always matter. And it wasn't just about this one case. It was about making sure that this kind of injustice never happened again. As Lisa sat in her living room, watching the news reports about the case, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her children, though they had been shaken by the events on the plane, were stronger now. They had seen their mother fight for them, fight for what was right, and they knew that no matter what came next, they would never back down. Lisa, quietly to herself, "We did it. We fought for what was right, and we won. And now the world knows. The world will change." The fight for justice had been long, and it had been hard, but the victory was worth it. Lisa knew that her family had become a part of something bigger, a movement that demanded change, that refused to be ignored. And as she watched her children, her heart swelled with pride. They were stronger now. They had learned the most important lesson of all, that they could fight for what was right and come out victorious. The Blackwell family had become more than just survivors of a single incident. They had become a beacon of resistance, a reminder that no matter the struggle, no matter the fight, truth, justice, and love always have a place in the world. And as long as they kept fighting, they would always find a way forward. If this story resonated with you, hit like to share it with others. Comment where you're watching from, and share your thoughts on what true justice means. Subscribe to Black and Slain Stories, because we're all in this fight together. The public apology from the airline is a step forward, but it's clear that the victory is about more than just one incident. It's about the broader fight for racial justice. Lisa's courage, combined with the support from passengers and witnesses, leads to lasting change within the airline. The story ends on a hopeful note, showing that even in the face of injustice, standing up for what is right can lead to meaningful change.